All right, guys, we're getting into it again. I wish that this problem was resolved so we didn't have to keep telling you what's going on, but we're talking about it again. Big Eva, big evangelicalism, allegedly conservative pastors and leaders continuing to sell their birthright for a bowl of porridge. Joining me today is the one and only Megan Basham, who has not only studied this shift, but has courageously called it out in her book, Shepherds for Sale, How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. Go back and listen to the conversation with her when her book first came out on the Seth Gruber show. Went probably 140,000 views just on YouTube. If you want a full treatment of the book, but news continues to come out and we got to talk about it. So why does the ERLC, the political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, why the ERLC doesn't help advocate for any conservative policies hey, let's not sexually mutilate minors, but then celebrates wins in Tennessee that ban the sexual mutilation of minors, and why Christianity Today is so quick to publish pieces on racial injustice and climate stewardship, right? Because humans are the disease, but can't seem to muster a clear biblical rebuke of WPATH, this organization pushing puberty blockers, double mastectomies, and genital surgeries on kids. This is where Christianity in America is now. Our leaders will only speak enough truth to sound Christian without upsetting the spirit of the age. Give us a rating and review, guys. Let us know what you think, okay? I appreciate you guys seeing you doing that. It's fun to read your stuff. I do read them. If you want me to read a comment you've got or a thought or just an endorsement of the show, go to your iPhone, the Purple app podcasts, Seth Gruber show, and then you click 5 stars and type in a little review. We really appreciate it. And hey, the White Rose Resistance is the organization behind this whole show, behind my ministry and our team around the country and our resistance chapters. And we're doing so much work, not just upstream with media and films and changing hearts and minds and really putting a fire in the belly of believers to do something, but downstream too with local chapters where Christian resistance really happens, right? In your backyard. If that's important to you, go to thewhiterose.life and we'd love your support. $35 a month. That's called an ally. And you get your battle box in the mail. You get the White Rose app. You can log in and you get curriculum, courses, and all this cool stuff. And that means so much to us. We're funded mainly by people given small monthly gifts. And we could use your support. $70 a month is called air support. And with everything else, you join our Books in the Barracks book club. So we read books together. And then we talk about it live on Zoom, you and me and supporters from actually all around the world. And if you want to give to the film we're making, The Last Stand, you can do so as well. It means so much to us. Let's get into it. This is The Seth Gruber Show. Megan Basham, welcome back to the show. I have a fun time with how I think God sometimes allows people to be named. Some people think I put too much stock into it. I'm not one of those people, Megan, who's like, what is God saying through the stars today? Right. I'm not trying to get all weird, but everyone hates you. Who makes money off of either managing the decline of Western civilization or trying to burn it to the ground. And your last name's Basham. I know. And I just think that's really cool. You have been bashing them quite a lot. And I love people who have all the right enemies. Welcome back to the Seth Gruber Show, Megan. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. It's always nice to do an interview with someone you know. So it's relaxed and chill. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, you are put under, I guess, the microscope a lot. It's been a few months since you've been on. I sometimes struggle, Megan, with, having these clickbaity thumbnails and conversations that sometimes help you and help me in our message or ministries when that's based off of creating division. among the body of Christ and naming names and saying these groups are not good Christian leaders.
Right.
And sometimes I get criticisms like that. And I know you do too. But my take on it is like, well, then why is there always so much to talk about? Like, we're not trying to go out of the way to sow dissension amongst the brethren. I see you as observing the dissension that's already happening by people who used to be lauded as Christian leaders and courageous warriors. And then you're like, oh, their dirty laundry is starting to be aired, and I think we should talk about it. Can you talk about that? Because you get attacked a lot, Megan, for being, oh, why, Megan, you're so divisive. Why can't we be unified as the church? We all love Jesus. But I've always thought that, no, there's more going on here, and Megan's more acknowledging what's there than she is working up division. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. You know, I do get that criticism a lot. And I would say that the issue is that we don't unify around error. And that's what so many of these ministries are asking us to do. And scripture nowhere tells us to be unified with error, that it actually does matter that we contend for the faith once delivered to all the saints. It is important to have right doctrine. And there are some issues on which, you know, I'm happy to agree to disagree, say with other denominations. I know some denominations will ordain women, and that's fine for them. I disagree with that, but I'm not looking to try to blow up some denomination that's on something that I think one can still go to heaven and have a different view of it. And that's one of those issues. There are other issues like gender and sexuality in marriage that are first tier issues. And I don't think that if you are in rebellion on those issues, you cannot be of the faith. And it's really important to note that scripture tells us that the divisive ones are going to come in with smooth talk and flattery. So when we picture divisive, we kind of picture people who are bringing up the receipts, who are showing, here's what these organizations are doing. But in fact, scripture tells us, no, those are not the divisive ones. The divisive ones will come in trying to disguise what they really believe, trying to really pull back from clarity around these doctrinal issues. And so that's what I really want to emphasize to people is that, look, we don't unify around error. And a lot of times the divisive ones, as scripture tells us, they're going to come in seeming very flattering, very winsome, when in fact, they're sowing discord. Yeah.
So your book, Shepherds for Sale, How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda, I think.
Nailed it. Yep.
Okay, good. We had you on at the time, and you know, a little bit to toot my own horn, I still was researching your most viewed YouTube interviews when you were in the midst of the book tour. And on this show was about 130,000 views on YouTube from that conversation.
Yes.
Which I think beat out Ali Bestucky for the same show. And I felt really cool about myself. But my point is that we got into a lot at that time about why you wrote it, the substance in the book, and why it was so important to be written, because a lot of Christians for a long time, and you say this in the intro, Megan, felt like, is there like an agenda to like maybe inject leftist politics into American evangelicalism? Why are my once favorite Christian publications and journals and authors and big nonprofits starting to kind of treat the culture of death with kid gloves, or worse yet, associate with people who are not only not Christians? Like, I'm willing to stand outside of an abortion clinic, Megan, with a secular materialist if he wants to try to save babies with me. But like, why are these organizations doing partnerships with people who are completely opposed to protecting the unborn, to marriage, to all of these things? And you said those inclinations and feelings you're having, Christian, are not unfounded.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of receipts that prove that what you're think is happening is indeed happening. Yeah. And so there's always new developments though. And this is why I texted you. I'm like, Megan, can you come back on? Because unfortunately, your book has just sort of revealed what's been happening for a long time, and it has not stopped happening. Right. And for the new listeners who are like, maybe they're listening to this right now. Who's Megan Basham? I wasn't listening back then. Okay. Can you tell us why you wrote that book? And why what is continuing to happen today is not a small matter for us to kind of brush under the rug and say, hey, let's talk about it over, dinner after Sunday evening worship service. But, let's unite. Like, why did you write a book about it that became a New York Times bestseller and spend all that time on this issue? And what do you call this issue? What exactly is the problem as you see it in American evangelicalism?
Yeah, this is the infiltration of left-wing politics and progressive actors into the church. They are not a part of the church. They are not Christians themselves, but they are funding front groups that wear evangelical clothes and evangelical names. And they're using this to try to inject progressive politics into Christians' minds and in how they approach the voting booth. And that's really why they're doing it. So when you talk about the church being politicized, they're the ones doing that, right? Yeah. They're the ones saying, let us come in and politicize your church. So I think that's really important to remember, that you have these groups like, for example, the Evangelical Environmental Network. So they have pushed this creation care agenda and literature and training into so many churches and ministries and seminaries. And in fact, they're backed by left-wing actors like the Rockefellers, like the Tides Foundation, like Bill Gates, like the Clinton Foundation, Bill and Hillary Clinton. So these are not people that we would expect to be funding sound doctrinal evangelical material. And that's what they're doing. So they're doing
that's such a good point. Yes. Right. Because it's not like, no, guys, listen to what Megan's saying. Okay. Because I've seen Megan get this critique of like, Megan, who cares? Okay, some of your friends, Megan, are being funded by people on the right. And so I don't hear you bringing that up. Who's really a shepherd for sale? You've seen these comments you've gotten, right? I've seen them on Twitter. Okay, full stop. Not the same thing at all. And if you have said that to Megan, Christianity Today, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, okay? It's not like the Rockefellers funding soup kitchens,
right?
That of a poverty organization that happens to be run by an evangelical Christian. Okay, these are people whose public platform and voting record is abortion through point of birth, chopping the genitals off of minors, tracking the anal sex activity of teenage boys without parental consent or knowledge, and kidnapping transgender confused minors and taking them across state lines without their parental's permission. Okay, these are the people, this is what these people support. Right. And then they go fund organizations whose positions are the sanctity of marriage and man and woman, the sanctity of life, unborn babies, parental rights is the primary shapers of children. You're like, well, that's not the same as leftists funding a soup kitchen because we can all agree we should feed the poor.
Right.
That's an example of people who hate everything this organization allegedly stands for, but are still giving them money.
Right.
Megan, why would they do that? Can you tell us?
Not, as you so well pointed out there, Seth, they're not giving them money to do things that we consider biblical mandates. They're not giving them money in order to try to protect and save the lives of babies. They're not giving them money to distribute Bibles or, as you said, soup kitchens. It's always political in nature. So to give you just one example, and this is one that I cite in the book, you have groups like the Democracy Fund, which was founded by the Buddhist left-wing Pierre Omidyar, who created eBay. So he's the founder of eBay, obviously a very wealthy gentleman now. So he's giving money to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is the lobbying arm of the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., the Southern Baptist Convention. So he gave them money to create a political report on how evangelicals interact with politics and how we can bring down the divisiveness. And they sent those materials out to churches. Now, why do you think someone like Pierre Omidyar's organization, which otherwise funds things like it's pro-sex worker, it's pro-LGBTQ, it directly said that our democracy depends on keeping abortion legal. Why would a group like that want to fund a political report coming out of a conservative evangelical organization? Well, I think we know why. So those are the kinds of projects they get involved in. And, just to give you a couple of recent examples, because I'm still working on this, as you said, the book came out, but this infiltration goes on. And so I continue to have to write about it. One of the things I cited in my book that I can't remember if you and I talked about last time was a group called the Afterparty. So it was. We
did, but give us remind us.
Right. So the Afterparty, they were targeting church members. They are targeting church members. So it's a group that was exclusively funded by left-wing secular foundations, Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, and the Hewlett Foundation, which, by the way, is the second largest private funder of Planned Parenthood in the country. They gave money to the After Party to create this political Bible study that was then promoted by the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which represents
and they're horrible.
185 member schools. So they're pushing it onto all of these campuses where parents send their kids to go, I want my kid to go to Christian college. They were sending it there, and this is all ahead of the 2024 election. And they were also promoting.
The timing was a coincidence.
Right. So they were promoting it to, a lot of mega churches, and they were saying, bring this curriculum in. In fact, one of the founders, Curtis Chang, who is a Democrat, said, listen, pastors, if it's too hard for you, you don't want to take the heat for dealing with all this political rancor, bring in our program. So they were encouraging pastors to, in fact, not do their duty to their members, their church members, to not shepherd as they're supposed to shepherd. So that was. And
by the way, Curtis Chang, for the listeners, guys, he went viral when he said, here's a great analogy for the COVID vaccine. The resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because just like the COVID vaccine might have had an origin story in a murdered baby, and similarly, the resurrection of our Savior had an origin story in a murdered Christ. But just as Christ's murder was redeemed for the good of all mankind, the murder of those babies could be redeemed in a life-saving medical device called the COVID vax. So just to remind you guys, that's who Megan's talking about.
Right.
Who's a pro-choice Democrat Christian who helps put together this political Bible study funded by pro-choice, left-wing, pro-trans the kids billionaires so that your senior pastor will bring it into home groups. Continue.
So when my initial reporting on that came out, they got very upset. They kind of tried to deny it, but they couldn't really deny it. And the article that I initially published on it was at First Things. They, of course, stood behind it. Well, flash forward to just a couple of weeks ago, a friend calls me up and says, he was a pro-life leader in Colorado, and it was just a casual conversation. And he tells me, I met with this pastor, and he told me that he's not going to talk about abortion from the pulpit anymore because he's learned a better way from this group that he's been involved with called J29 Coalition. Well, it's obviously a reference to Jeremiah 29 and work for the city, the good of the city that you live in. And I go, okay, I don't know who this coalition is, but that sounds terrible. So I start looking into it. It is the same people, Curtis Chang, David French, Russell Moore. And now here's the key. So this launched again in 2024, I think around April in 2024. So this just came out. This group is not targeting the church members anymore. They're going directly after the pastors. So they say on their website, we want to disciple your conservative pastors in politics specifically. So one, I have a huge issue with that. So they're a parachurch organization with no accountability to anyone, no authority structure. They are outside any sort of formal church body. And they're saying, we want to disciple your pastors in politics. Now, they claim to be theologically conservative. They stress this a lot. They say we want to talk to conservative pastors because we are conservatives. But then you start to look into their history and you find out, no, this is not a conservative group at all. In fact, they're once again exclusively funded by left-wing secular foundations and people like that. One of them being, again, the Hewlett Foundation, second largest funder of Parenthood of the country. Also a group called Panorama Global, which is sort of like Arabella, if you've ever heard of them. They're the dark money investors. Yeah. Yes. So they sort of bundle funding so that it's really hard to track. So they're also funded by Panorama Global, which is well known for its LGBTQ activism. And it's supported by people like Rashida Tlaib and Ocasio-Cortez. So these are the people that they're associating with. And its parent organization, so there's really no legal separation between this group, J29, and its parent organization, which is called the American Values Coalition. And it was founded by Nap Nazworth, which, if you're not familiar with him, he claims to be theologically conservative, but he wrote a book. He contributed a chapter to a book that was anti-Trump from Ron Sider. If you're familiar with Ron Sider, he's kind of the old school left-wing evangelical. He's, promoted by the Washington Post, the New York Times, people like that. And then the other founder, a gentleman named Daniel Grain, wrote an essay in which he said Students for Life harmed transgender people when they said men cannot be mothers. So these are the people. They also have a number of Black liberation theology proponents.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, the feminist Caitlin Scheiss, who is a co-host on the Holy Post podcast with Phil Vischer. A lot of people are familiar with
the creator of VeggieTales.
Yes, how far gone they are. So this is very much it is not a politically neutral group. The entire leadership of this organization is never Trump, and vocally never Trump, and yet they're claiming to be conservatives. They have not a single person in their organization who supported Donald Trump. So how balanced and nonpartisan can this be?
Yeah.
And they're funded by organizations that are far left and support LGBTQ initiatives. So these are the people who are saying, we're theological conservatives and we want to disciple your pastor, your theologically conservative pastor. So that's why I wrote the book, because, not only was I documenting what was going on then, but it's still going on right now.
So basically, after they failed with the after party, political Bible study to help churches find a third way. In other words, let's resuscitate, let's revive the body of Tim Keller. Sorry. Sort of a funny joke, but let's find a third way to engage the political realities of our day, because the left is a little too crazy and the right is too whatever they're calling it now, theocratic or something ridiculous. And so there's another way to engage. So I guess that failed by people who called Drag Queen Story Hour a blessing of liberty.
Right.
David French, Curtis Chang, who's a pro-abortion Democrat who compares the aborted baby vaccine to the resurrection of our Savior, and Russell Moore, who's, his record is a little bit too long and bad for me to think of one snippet right now, Megan. And so that failed. And now on the heels of that, now there's a new one, you're saying, called J29, funded by some of the same people to try to accomplish the same goal of just bringing a healthy, balanced political engagement model to the local church. What do you think is really behind this? I've written about this. I've thought about this a lot, but I always love other voices that have thought deeper than I have, like you. Like, what is the spirit behind this? The spirit behind, like, hey, I got no problem claiming the name of Christ, calling myself a pro-life, pro-marriage conservative, and then partnering with, going to events with, endorsing and taking money from people who hate everything the Christian church stands for. Like, I think you opened with some commentary on that in your book, but what do you think the spirit behind that is?
I think that a major part of this is simply that someone like Russell Moore and David French have been given the keys to the establishment kingdom in a way, if they are willing to be the infiltrators, to bring this progressivism into the church, to try to benefit from their past reputations as conservative. They've now obviously shifted to an extreme degree. And so they come into the church and they say, look, you remember me. I'm David French from National Review. I'm a sound Christian. And so they bring them in, but now they're involved with all of these left-wing groups and they're bringing in these left-wing arguments. And, I can give you just one example of what J29 is doing. They're promoting an event they have coming up with the president of Sojourners. In no world is Sojourners conservative. So you have a magazine that calls for the queering of the Christian church. And
Jim Wallace?
Yes. And it has a new president now whose name's escaping me at the moment. But so they're doing this event.
Wallace is out.
President.
Sojourners is apostate.
Yes. I mean, it is extreme LGBTQ affirming, pro-abortion. So these are the kind of writers that they're bringing in and the sort of voices that they're saying.
J29 is doing an event with Sojourners.
J29's parent organization, which is the American Values Coalition, they always use these sneaky names that are sort of the opposite of what they actually are.
Right.
They're doing an event, and J29 was promoting it, saying our parent organization is doing this event with the president of Sojourners. Again, a supposedly Christian magazine that calls for the queering of the church. So they're doing an event with them, and and J29 is promoting it, saying everyone should come listen to this and learn from this. So this is the kind of discipleship that they're offering your pastors, your conservative pastors. They've been very specific that they want to target conservatives. So, to me,
is that the farthest you've seen Russell Moore and David French go?
No. In fact, another story really? I had just in the last couple of weeks, I covered how I went back and started re-listening to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, which was kind of, Christianity Today's greatest success, this huge hit podcast. And I hadn't listened to it for a while, and I was working on another project that was relevant to it, and I started listening to it again. And I noticed that the ads were from the company BetterHelp, which is sort of a pop therapy site. You go on there and they connect you to therapists. Well, when you go on there, the first question it asks, after asking you if you're seeking individual or couples counseling, is how you identify. Are you a man, a woman? Are you non-binary? Are you something else? There's a long list of choices. And then it asks you your pronouns. And then it offers to you, after you answer a few more questions, to connect you with an affirming LGBTQ group. So this is who is advertising on Christianity Today. Now, I did some digging into it. Some other people, like the Christian Post, accidentally ran some BetterHelp ads because they said it was bundled from an outside advertising company. And when they realized it, they immediately took them down and said, we're not going to use those anymore. Well, Christianity Today, totally different case. They were recording the ads in-house. So they knew exactly who they were dealing with. It was done intentionally.
Was this Mike Cosper or Ed Stetzer's voice?
This was Mike Cosper.
Yeah, he's the voice, right? Isn't he the host of that podcast?
He's the host of it. I mean, they had someone else in-house reading the ads, but I was able to confirm with the former producer of Russell Moore's show that these ads were produced in-house. So they're creating this for a
former producer of Russell Moore's show?
Yes.
Oh, I have so many questions for that guy.
So
continue.
So these ads were being produced in-house. They're for an LGBTQ affirming therapy app. And the app tells you things like, for example, that LGBT pride parades, drag queen performances, these are very important to the health and well-being of our LGBTQ neighbors. So this is what this particular advertiser is promoting. This is what was running on Christianity Today's most successful podcast. And then one other thing to add to that, as I started digging through that, I happened to come across, as I was reading Christianity Today's coverage, limited, I will say very limited coverage of the transgender issue, I noticed that they repeatedly referred to a particular expert at Wheaton College, and that was Dr. Mark Yarhouse. I looked him up. He's a member of WPATH. Which, for those who are not familiar, it is an extreme transgender organization that claims to be a medical organization that pushes for legalizing the mutilation and transgender procedures of children. So that's what that organization does. If you're not familiar with WPATH, they are the sort of medical group that all of these activists turn to try to legitimize their desire to do this to children. He is a member of that group. No one who is a member of that group should be quoted in any sort of Christian publication. So that was another thing that just came up recently when I went back and started looking at some of these materials.
Good Lord.
So Mike tentacles are coming in.
Yarhouse, I remember, I know that name, Megan. He spoke at Westmont College in Santa Barbara when I was an undergraduate.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, he gets around.
Dang. So.
And by the way, the advice he gave Christianity Today when they asked him about outlawing and banning these transgender procedures on children, he didn't think that that was a good idea because he said it really needs to be between the doctor and the patients. So he came out in the pages of Christianity Today against banning transgender procedures on children.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was in Christianity Today.
It's pretty wild when, I don't have something to say, Megan, and yeah. I mean, I wrote an article that went viral at Clear Truth Media, citing a lot of your stuff and linking to your book so people would buy more copies.
Thank you.
about exactly this. And I'm still what do you say to this? There's plenty of examples throughout the Old Testament, Megan, of God's people partnering with those that hate God for allegedly strategic purposes, and it never ends well.
Right. And look, I mean, I think you have to look at this and go, part of the reason that Christianity Today is able to do this is because they're no longer sort of bound by the worldview of their constituents, which would be their readers. I think probably that readership is falling off, but they now receive millions of dollars from the Lilly Endowment, which is the foundation that was started by the Eli Lilly family of pharmaceutical fame. So it's a pharmaceutical related, big pharma, secular Foundation, and they now receive millions of dollars from them for preaching projects and things like that. So they no longer,
millions.
yes, millions. They at the beginning of the year, they received a $5 million grant from the Lilly Endowment. So you can see pretty clearly why Christianity Today is not beholden to its Christian readership. It's beholden to a lot of these secular funders, and that's how they manage to stay afloat.
So Lilly Foundation.
Endowment. It's called the Lilly Endowment.
So they're funding all manner of killing babies, sexualizing kids.
They're more in the LGBT. I haven't really checked them on abortion, but well, that's not true. They have funded a number of very left-wing seminaries that promote reproductive justice, LGBTQ rights. So yes, they do give a lot of money to supposed Christians who support things like that. Yes.
Good Lord. Do you know of any stories of someone that's been able to approach Russell Moore at an event with their iPhone recording and like start asking hard questions? I've been prepared to do this. One time I thought I was sitting behind David French. I told my wife, I said, I think that's David French. I could have sworn it was. And I was getting ready when we got off the plane. And then I swear it could have been his lookalike. It wasn't. But you tried to do this ages ago, and he said, I have to go pee-pee. He had to run to the bathroom.
Listen,
but has anyone tried this recently? Because he has a lot of questions. He has a lot to account for. And like, it's totally fair for just a local lay Christian who loves the Lord to be like, I'm just kind of concerned. Like, can you answer some questions? Because it doesn't seem like Russ is very open to that.
No, and he is characterized by a refusal to answer questions. And I can give you, innumerable examples of that. When he was the head of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, he was notorious for avoiding speaking to pastors. Now, keep in mind, the tithes of Southern Baptists fund the ERLC, and he would refuse to speak with the pastors who had criticisms or concerns. He would not meet with them. I've talked to numerous former members of the ERLC who said they as staff were left to deal with upset pastors. And you see that again just recently. Christianity Today ran a rather notorious article in which they argued that perhaps Jesus was not nailed to the cross, but merely tied.
I remember that.
Right. So, that got a lot of outcry. And strangest thing I've ever seen in the magazine, the author of the article retracts it, but the editor-in-chief said nothing. Now, journalistically,
is that normal?
That is not normal. I have never seen that before, where the editorial staff does not respond to it and says, we're just going to let the article writer retract it, and the editor-in-chief says nothing. I've just never seen anything like that before. But that's the degree to which Russell Moore does not respond to criticism, does not ever take responsibility or accountability. Wherever the buck stops, it's never with him. And as you said, I personally have reached out to him maybe half a dozen times and ran into him in an airport once when we were on the same flight and tried to get him to answer some questions then. And, very respectfully said, Dr. Moore, I have contacted your assistant a number of times. You are always busy. We're standing right here in this line boarding our flight. Can I just ask you a few questions right now while we're right here? Because they would always brush me off. It was never no. It was always, he can't do it right now. And he said no. He basically fled from me and said, no, I can't do that. You have to schedule it with my assistant. And of course, I followed up and never did hear from him. So, it's not just me, though. This is a habit of his. He tends to only give comments, apparently, to the Washington Post and friendly left-wing media outlets. He does not talk to the right.
But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. Listen, you should be putting diapers and wiping your baby precious little bottoms with products from a company that would not have slaughtered your baby in utero. I know it's shocking. Well, not to those of you who listen every week, but almost every major diaper company in America supports abortion. And my friends, the co-founders of Every Life, I remember we had Michael Seifert on and then his wife, Sarah Gable, on, and they're showing me all these diaper companies in 2023 that were posting on Instagram these in 2022, these mournful, just mea culpa cry fests about Roe v. Wade getting overturned and promising to pay for their female employees to fly them to blue states to get abortions. It's like, dude, your baby company would be a lot richer if you encourage people to keep their babies, because then you could sell them more diapers. But you see what the woke mind virus does to people. It makes you stupid. We need to fight the culture war on many fronts, but one of them is financially. And I'm pleading with you guys, if you are having babies still who need diapers, if you know people who are, the nursery director at your church, for goodness sake, there's no excuse for Christians to give their money to companies that sell products for children and babies who want to kill those babies. Everylife.com. Promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order. Get your baby diapers, wipes, shampoos, lotions, non-toxic, all great from a pro-life company, and the quality's great. My wife and I use it, and then we do the subscription, so it comes to the house, gets delivered right before we run out. Why don't you do that? Promo code Seth10 for 10% off your first order, Seth10. It lets them know that I sent you, and that helps us here at the Seth Gruber Show on the White Rose Resistance. Everylife.com. Don't wait. Get your baby stuff from Every Life. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when, if you walked into a church lobby, I mean, there's Christianity Today magazine there. I mean, almost every church in America had a subscription. Lay Christians are reading it. And for a while, organizations like that served a really good purpose. I mean, Christian commentary, biblical worldview, world events through a Christian worldview, and discipleship and encouragement and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't see any world in which it's appropriate, given the space that Christianity Today is in and allegedly what their positions are, to be receiving money from the kind of people that they receive money from. And their refusal to answer those questions is pretty telling. And I'm encountering more and more of this, Megan. And I think really the church owes Megan Basham a thank you. I mean, what was the vote at the SBC in 2024 to abolish the ERLC? What was the percentage?
So in 2024, there were different estimates because they just raised their hands and it's kind of hard to eyeball, but people estimated maybe about 30%.
And then what was it 2025?
43%. So, I would say the reckoning is coming if they don't change direction aggressively and quickly, because look, I mean, part of the reason the ERLC survives is because you have a lot of people in the room who are in some way beholden to the organizations within the SBC. So if you have like the North American Mission Board head, if they have a lot of people there who are in some way, their church is taking money from the North American Mission Board or they work for the North American Mission Board, they're going to tend to be very friendly to the institutions. And so there was a lot of those people in the room and a lot of people didn't vote. So when you look at 43%, that's a pretty overwhelming number of no confidence votes. And it should cause the ERLC to sit up and change direction. And I'm going to wait to see if they do that, because that should have been a major wake-up call. But instead, what we're seeing is they're taking victory laps for things that they weren't even involved in. Just this morning, I saw them celebrating the SCOTUS ruling that states do have a right to ban transgender procedures on children. Yes, and that was based on that Tennessee law. And I spoke to 3 different Tennessee lawmakers who were involved in that bill, and all 3 told me, we never heard from the ERLC. They never supported us in this. So, I mean, that's
and doesn't the director of the ERLC, Brent Leatherwood, doesn't he live in Tennessee?
Yes, it is literally the state capitol is 15 minutes walk from the ERLC's building. So they very easily could have been involved in this. And the Daily Wire was heavily involved. We were, in
Matt Walsh, huge, Robbie Starbuck.
Matt Walsh held a rally. So we were heavily involved in this bill. So it was a little amusing to see the ERLC out today taking a victory lap when the fight was on, when the rallies were being held outside the state capitol that was right there in their own backyard. They weren't there. They didn't show up.
Megan, I just finished rereading through Lord of the Rings because, like, why not? I mean, like, it's the best thing ever.
As every Christian man does, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then I watched the movies again. I couldn't stay awake last night on Return of the King extended version, the only right way to watch it because it's 4 hours long. But on vacation, I finished The Two Towers and then Return of the King. And I think I told this to you last time, okay? But one of the things that's so great about Tolkien's Legendarium is how anyone who cares about truth at all, who thinks that there is beauty, there is objectivity in the world at all, can't help but read The Lord of the Rings and like notice things in their own life, notice things in the world around them, right? Because it's the whole battle is just full of themes and observations that are indicative of what does happen in the real world, okay? And I think I told this to you before, but like Russell Moore and these folks, they're basically just Saruman.
Right.
I know we're making like super like 200% nerd level analogies right now, but that's okay. Most people that listen to this show are homeschoolers. Like once a leader of leaders,
right?
Once considered wise, once given great power, and Saruman tells Gandalf, "Who can stand against Sauron? It would be wise, Gandalf, my friend, to join him." Okay, you asked me what the motivation is. It's that. Yeah. Yeah, and then what does Gandalf say? He said, you know, he tells Saruman, like, you know, who is this who's abandoned wisdom for folly? You know what I mean? It would be wise to join him. We see the writing on the wall. Who can stand against the left? Right. Our end will be sure and sudden unless we join the enemy. But how does Saruman's end? He ends running with his tail between his legs all the way to Hobbiton to try to disturb the little people who are too weak to stand against him, and even they end up defeating him. And I'm like, this is going to be your end, Russell Moore. And Ed Stetzer, Sean McDowell's boss, and the Dean of Talbot, which I keep saying this on the show, but Sean McDowell will not speak out against his boss, Ed Stetzer, because all of these problems are actually the same problem. Right. They're shepherds for sale. Y'all need to go buy Megan's book if you haven't read it yet. I wanted to get your take on this, Megan, before we end. People love and hate Mark Driscoll. I appreciate a lot of the clips I see of him talking about objectively true things. I don't want to get into that. I know people have different opinions. I just want to say that he does represent this very bold, masculine kind of faith, like protector, provider, you know, defender of the weak. It's just funny to me, I guess, that of all the podcasts that the trans people wanted to fund, it was a podcast telling the story of a guy that really today is a total threat to the liberal establishment and to the direction of our culture. Like, I don't know Mark Driscoll, but his church is blowing up in Phoenix. And I have donors that go there, actually, Megan. People keep sending me like, do you know Mark? We go to this church. And they're telling me they're drawn to it because of the bold, masculine, unrelenting, kids gloves off, pull no punches approach to the issues and applying the Bible to it. And regardless of what you think about Mark Driscoll, if we had more of that in the church when it comes to these cultural issues, we wouldn't be in this position in the first place. And so much of the war against, I guess, like masculinity, patriarchy, and even Western civilization and patriarchy are proxy wars against Christianity and the religion that all of this sort of courage is based on. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
No, and that was actually part of why I started to go back and listen to the podcast, because I wasn't really paying attention back then. You know, my kids were young. I was deep in those mom years where you're very hands-on. So I really wasn't paying attention back then. And so that was part of why I went to start listening to the podcast to go, okay, help me understand what the issues were, because I wasn't watching. And I'm not through it yet. I kind of dropped off it and got involved in another project. But, you know, the first maybe 5 episodes I listened to, it was fascinating to me that it wasn't just attacking Mark Driscoll. He was sort of the totem of Donald Trump, of John MacArthur, of masculinity. So really there was this deep critique of masculinity that went far beyond anything that happened at Mars Hill. And that was what was so interesting to me, is that this podcast was used for that purpose, to really be a critique of patriarchy and masculinity in the church, when I think it's really hard to look around at what the church has been for the last 20 years and say, we had too many men being masculine. I just don't see how anyone can argue that. And one of the things that was sort of fascinating to me, and one of the first episodes, was this language of spiritual abuse. because we can all have conflict and argument. But when you say, oh no, I'm being abused or traumatized by this conflict, at that point, that's a way to sort of emotionally steer and say, now you have to back off and stop making these arguments because I feel traumatized by them. And one of the fascinating things in one of those early episodes was hearing an adult man, an elder, say that he was spiritually traumatized by Mark Driscoll making the comment in a meeting, you either get on the bus or you're going to get run over by it. Now, men speak sharply. I don't know what the context of that comment was, if it was right or wrong for Mark Driscoll to say it, but I know that an adult man saying that they experienced trauma from having a tough conversation with another adult man is an issue of masculinity in the church, because we should be able to have some conflict, even some sharp conflict, and continue to have the conversation. But if you suddenly say, no, I'm traumatized and abused, that's a way of emotionally manipulating the conversation, because now you're saying you can't even talk to me about these issues or I'm spiritually abused by them. And so, and again, I have not finished the podcast, so I don't want to be blown up with letters, people saying, but he did this and this, because it sounds like maybe there were some financial improprieties and other things that were legitimate. But my interest was in how the podcast used the story of Driscoll's church as an indictment of masculinity in the church, period, and patriarchy. And you heard that again and again. They used commentators who are far from Christian orthodoxy, people like Christian Cobes Dumais, who wrote Jesus and John Wayne.
Oh.
Right. So, I mean, these were the experts that they used, people who were LGBTQ affirming, people who are constantly critiquing the patriarchy. And again and again, what so much of it comes down to is they're looking for people who seem representative of Trump voters, and they're critiquing them. So at the bottom of this, I always see sort of a political angle. And it's very clear when you're listening to this podcast that it's not just about Mark Driscoll. Okay. It's not how you vote. So
my inclination was right.
Correct.
That's oh my gosh, that's hilarious. There's so much more I always want to talk to you about. Russell Moore recently was posting something about, I think he was responding. That's right. I think he was criticizing our friend Allie Beth Stuckey, her book, Toxic Empathy. And then also my friend Joe Rigney wrote a book about how empathy can be the sin of empathy. And they're all like Mike Cosper, Russell Moore, like all these people are rushing. This was in the last 2 months, I think, Megan.
He called Allie Beth a Nazi, essentially. Russell Moore called Allie Beth a Nazi.
He did. Yeah. Which, by the way, like that is what soy boy, effeminate, little triggered little boys do when they don't know how to hold their own in the masculine environment of the public square debate, is they turn to that kind of stuff. Which, anyways, doesn't surprise me. But all of Big Eva, and I just see Russell Moore's face on the front of that. They all rush in to defend the beauty of empathy is almost like as a Christian virtue. And I'm like, dude, like this is Dr. Russell Moore. This is like PhD. I went to seminary. I'm over here. I went to a woke, stupid leftist Christian college in Santa Barbara, Megan, with pro-abortion faculty professors on the payroll. And I would know that more than anyone else because I started the first pro-life club and I debated with those professors via email. I have no higher education beyond a bachelor's. And I'm like, Russell, all Allie said was that toxic empathy is when it leads you to affirm sin and to support policies that harm your neighbors. It's pathological compassion. It's love without truth. Why is that's not a sophisticated, difficult concept to grasp? What's your take on people like Russell Moore going, oh my gosh, Megan and Allie Beth are saying that empathy sometimes, if it's unmoored from truth and love, could actually be a bad thing. And they hate this. Like, I don't understand it. Can you help me?
Well, I mean, I think it's an indictment of their own writing and rhetoric. One of the things I can give you an example that we saw in Christianity Today was this stress over harming trans people. Now we see children being cut up by this ideology. We say they're
literally
losing their sexual capacity, their reproductive capacity. Your empathy should absolutely be with the children to whom this is being done. And instead, what we see from people like Russell Moore and David French is a fear that we have gone too far in indicting this movement. Just today, I saw a New York Times column from David French where he was wringing his hands about the harm done to transgender people by right-wing rhetoric. And I'm thinking, as children are being torn apart, that's your concern.
Wait, say that again?
That his concern was that David French in a New York Times column was saying that the Christian rhetoric on the right towards the trans movement has been harmful, and that it has, inflicted trauma on them in the way we speak about it. And I'm sitting, and again, this is exactly the same thing we saw with their new group, the J29 Coalition, its founder saying that Students for Life harmed trans people by saying men can't be mothers. Just by that,
right.
Just by saying men can't be mothers. So we saw the same thing in David French's New York Times article, and you see the same thing from Russell Moore, where they're demanding that we show empathy and kindness to things that are incredibly cruel in practice. And it's the same language that they use on the abortion issue. So it's a way to sort of suddenly bring in some of these left-wing priorities like, say, racial equity or wealth inequality, and say this also has to be a pro-life issue. So that's what we see them do, is to try to emotionally steer you to say, if you don't have empathy for this point of view, then you can't credibly claim to be pro-life. Well, you got a whole bunch of people then who go, I am pro-life, I want to be pro-life. So then they start to mitigate their language, and they start to edit themselves in speaking truthfully about what the transgender movement is. Yes, and that is what they managed to do. And so then that trickles down, right? Because then you have these well-known, but maybe not quite at the highest tier where Russell Moore and David French are, pastors who are informed by them and informed by how they speak about these issues. So then these pastors get in the pulpit and they also go, we don't want to be hateful, we don't want to be harmful, so we're not going to speak truthfully about what this movement is and how it's tearing apart families and children. And so their empathy is completely misplaced. And that's what we see with this, to the point that David French said that Texas was wrong to try to hold parents accountable for abuse if they subjected their children to transgender procedures. He said that was wrong, that parents shouldn't be allowed, parents shouldn't be held responsible for that we need to have empathy for these parents who are taking these kids to gender clinics to get them cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and have their breasts chopped off.
So one of the signals or signs of toxic empathy is when you misplace who the victim is.
Yes.
And so let me just restate, guys, what Megan just said. David French, by the way, there's a reason why David French has a weekly op-ed in the New York Times and Vodi Bakum does not. But we can get back to that. And so one of the founders of the After Party, left-wing funded political Bible studies for your conservative pastor, and their new one, J29, also David French behind it, believes that parents should have legal immunity and impunity to sexually castrate their own minors.
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
That's interesting. So you know what I was fascinated by? Maybe we'll try to land the plane here because I know we got to get both of us out on time here. The idea of self-censorship. So like what Megan just said, guys, is not even really that sophisticated or complicated. Megan, you're a sophisticated thinker, but there was nothing sophisticated about what she just said, guys. Like everyone looks to people with more masters or PhDs ahead of them that they believe are better read, better researched, and more experienced to develop their own thoughts on cultural issues and how to speak on those issues. And particularly like aspiring Christian authors and pastors do this.
Correct.
Because they have to talk about these issues because they have a church, right? Or I have to talk about it because I have a ministry, right? So like for me, it's Dr. George Grant, right? So he's the smartest human I know. Right. And he's like, I mean, it's like he's like a Chesterton or something. So like a lot of people, even in how they talk about issues, whether you know it or not, Christian, that commentator you really like, okay, that you listen to, they're being shaped by others, by things they're reading, talks they're listening to. This has been going on since human beings were created. This is not sophisticated. So when you have people up here at the top, like Christianity Today and Russell Moore, there is it's human nature. There's a trickle down effect that affects how pastors speak on those issues. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to interrupt and say, this is not, by the way, you're exactly right, Seth, and it's not just your opinion. The left-wing foundations directly say We are doing this so that the influence trickles down to the pews. So
That's
they're
right.
actually in their own internal documents, they're transparent about that. They call it the rent-a-pastor model. And they say that they hope that this influence trickles down.
Wait, you came across that phrase?
That exact phrase, rent-a-pastor, rent an evangelical. Yeah.
From left-wing funders or
Yes.
left-wing groups?
From left-wing foundations. It was from New America, which is a Soros and Bill Gates linked foundation.
Who have they funded?
So New America does more research for others. They're kind of the research.
I know it's
owners.
dark money. I know it goes through different groups.
And so they published this. This was one of their researchers who was really working on why the efforts to get evangelicals on board the climate change movement have failed. So she did this deep dive into looking at why did our money not do what it was supposed to do.
Wow.
And in this autopsy of, okay, Clinton Foundation, Bill Gates, everyone poured so much money in and it didn't really move the needle that much. Why not? So in this autopsy report, she points to their rent and evangelical model and their trickle down approach, in which they're hoping that if they can take a few of these high profile people like a Russell Moore, and they can convince them to sort of start advocating for progressive policies in this new churchy jargon, that will then trickle down to the pews. And to some degree, they did find success, but I would say they have found success with the people in leadership. So this is maybe to take it full circle. You asked me, why do we see this so much in institutional leadership? And it's because those are the people who are being targeted. Now, what's happening right now is it didn't trickle all the way down to the pews because the pews rejected it. So you've had a lot of outcry from your ordinary Southern Baptist, your ordinary Presbyterian or non-denominational, whatever your particular flavor of Christianity is. You have people in the pews going, hang on a minute, I'm not a racist. I don't think I need to apologize for being a racist. Well, wait a minute. I don't think pro-life includes all of these other things like immigration and climate change. I think pro-life means saving babies. And so suddenly, I mean, that's what you really have right now is a reckoning of people in the pews. It wasn't just me. I think all I did was sort of explain to people, you see it happening. I'm just telling you now how it's happening and why it's happening.
Yeah.
So really, I think that is the ultimate aim. And they have had some success with that. If you look at organizations like the Gospel Coalition and how they deal with these issues, they're not as bad as Christianity Today, but there's still a certain respectable tone that they feel that they have to keep. And there are certain issues that they bring in when they talk about immigration or climate change that are clearly left-wing coded. And I think that's the influence you're seeing there. From all of that money that came in and it went into the seminaries and it has just sort of transformed the leadership of the church. Thankfully, we have lay people who also understand their responsibility to contend for the faith, and they're doing so.
Oh, man, imagine that being your legacy. Man, imagine George Soros's group calling you a rent-a-pastor.
Yep.
Like Russell Moore, like Ed Stetzer. Hey, over there at Biola. George Soros calls you a rent-a-pastor. Like, dude, if that was me, I'd be like, yo, I think I need to do some repentance.
Right.
I want to finish with this. Have you heard of Theodore Dalrymple?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Oh, good.
National
Good.
Review writer, yeah.
He's fascinating to me. I've never met him. I don't know where he aligns on everything, but I think he's fascinating. He's an English cultural critic. I think he lives in London. We'll finish with this. I'm just going to read this. It's very short. It's 3 sentences, 3 or 4. And it's this idea of self-censorship. And I want to finish with this because I believe that all these folks we're talking about, Megan, if they're not communists, then they are the paid useful idiots, to quote Lenin, of the communists who are participating in cultural sabotage and self-conscious sabotage to get the people, the voters or the lay people, to self-censor.
Yep.
And here's what Dalrymple says. He said, political correctness is communist propaganda writ small. In my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, not to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or worse yet, when they're forced to repeat those lies themselves, they lose once and for all their sense of probity, their sense of integrity. He goes on to say, to assent to obvious lies in some small way makes one evil oneself. One standing to resist anything is thus eroded and even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. I think if you study and examine political correctness, it has the same effect, and it's intended to.
I'm going to need this quote. I got to use that somewhere. That's phenomenal.
What do you think about that in application to what we talked about?
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that has been, look, so much of what has been brought in is clearly Marxist. When we talk about the after party, when we talk about this J29 group, they have simply swapped, who the oppressed and the oppressors are for Marxism. Right. Now it's racial oppression. And that is really what they emphasize. In fact, it was funny. I had a little exchange with one of the coaches, one of these J29 coaches on Twitter. And he said, I am a conservative, but what I'm interested in is something about confronting racial capitalism or the sins of racial capitalism. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I went, hold up. What is racial capitalism? Because I thought capitalism was, come one, come all and do your best. And it's the best system we've ever had. And so it was interesting that he took that tone to sort of argue that he wasn't a Marxist. I went,
right.
So we know very well that, the social justice movement has simply supplanted old school Marxism and replaced the working class with minorities. And that's so much what we see. And that's what these people are bringing in. And it was fascinating to me that not only did one of the J29 coaches say that to me, I think his name was Reverend Malcolm Foley, a number of their other coaches are heavily involved in CRT, promoting this idea of systemic racial injustice, right along with Russell Moore and David French and the others. And so, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's the thing they have brought in to silence us, because so many of us knew at the time when, these BLM marches were going on and the riots were going on and this was coming into our churches, so many of us went, I'm not a racist. My kids don't have white privilege, but they were whispering it to each other. And that was the humiliation. They didn't want to stand up and say it out loud until a little further down the road when we all saw what a scam it was. And then suddenly, a few voices spoke up and now you're seeing more. But that, I think you're dead on. Absolutely right. That's what's happening.
I mean, J29 here a day or two ago, guys, reposted Zach Lambert, who I've had run-ins with. He's a quote unquote pastor of a church in Austin, Texas. And I know for a fact that Zach Lambert supports abortion.
Right. And I mean, all forms of...
you don't even have to dig deep here, guys. I've just went to J29's X Twitter account. I have had debates, run-ins with this guy on X. He supports abortion publicly. And conservative Russell Moore and David French, their account is retweeting him. You don't even have to do Megan Basham research here, guys. Right. Megan, that's it for today. Where can people follow you, stay up on your work and writing, and get your book?
So, almost all of my work will be at Daily Wire. I'm on the morning. I'm on FMLA right now because I'm dealing with a little health battle. But you normally find me at Morning Wire, which is our news podcast at Daily Wire. You will find me on Twitter at Meg Basham, on Instagram at journalist Megan Basham. And if you're interested in that BetterHelp piece on Christianity Today and the LGBTQ therapy app, you can find that at Clear Truth Media. And some of the other things that you and I talked about today will be coming out shortly, hopefully in the next few days at First Things.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you, Megan. We appreciate you. We're praying for you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, Seth.
Until next week. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.